Morning, everybody. My name is Anthony Shaw. I work for Dimension Data. I'm the Director for Innovation. And I'm going to be talking to you this morning about orchestrating the digital experience. Does that sound okay? Yeah. I am visiting this week from Australia. You might be able to pick up some of my accent. I'm not necessarily a local, so I will try and talk slowly, and I apologise, my English is also quite bad, being Australian, so we'll see how we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is some of the challenges that people are having adopting cloud, and then we're going to look at ways in which you can orchestrate not just a single cloud but multiple clouds, and thinking about your holistic cloud strategy. And later on in the talk, I'm going to talk about how to protect yourself against changes in market shifts. So we know that the landscape of cloud vendors has changed quite a few times over the last couple of years. So one of the main points we're going to start off with is in 2014, there was a survey done to see reasons why people were not adopting cloud. And they did the survey against small, medium and large sized businesses. And the number one issue at the time was around concern about security. The second issue was concern around cost. And over the last 2 years, that's changed. The number one issue across the board, whether that's cloud beginners, who are companies who are just trying out the cloud explorers, that's companies who've used probably normally one or two clouds, or cloud focused, which is companies who have leveraged a major cloud strategy and also potentially propped up with a private cloud. You'll see the top issue is lack of expertise and resources. So this has been a big shift. Also, you'll see the trend in security goes down. As people get more familiar with the cloud, they get more mature in their cloud strategy. And the other one that pops up, contrary to the way people position it, is building a private cloud actually comes in further in the adoption curve instead of at the beginning. So in 2014, the idea was that you build your private cloud and then you can burst into the public. What we're actually seeing is almost the opposite now, where as people build up a more mature cloud strategy, they leverage the public cloud and then they bring back into the private cloud later on. So starting from the left-hand side, the cloud beginners are typically organizations who just provision cloud resources ad hoc. And then as you go into more of a multi-cloud and a hybrid environment, you need to introduce some level of automation. So this is really where DevOps comes in. So the traditional process was that development would build the application, throw it over some sort of walled operations. They would then figure out how to build the infrastructure, deploy it and manage it and run it. So that's now changing to a shared responsibility where development teams and operations teams try and work together. This is the idea known as DevOps. And in order to get there, you need to build up an idea of continuous delivery where the development teams can quickly and easily deploy their applications out into either a production or a test environment. Now, to make things even more complex, we've now got this idea of microservices where the number of machines or endpoints that you need to manage has suddenly exploded. And instead of going from releasing software every 6 months, we're talking about doing releases. In Microsoft's case, they do 200 releases a day for both Azure and Office 365. Their development teams are doing a few releases every hour. So that's kind of the extreme end of the scale. And one of the ways that you can do that is by leveraging some of the tools available on the market. I've been speaking a lot this week with clients around DevOps, and one of the consistent messages is there's a bit of confusion as to which tool they should use, and the number of tools has just been changing and expanding every month. This survey was done, and you can see there's some consistency around configuration tools. Puppet and Chef are for configuring server operating systems and software. And Ansible and Salt, similar job. All of these tools down the bottom end are related to microservices. So I've actually noticed as well that geographically this actually makes a big difference. Puppet is a lot more popular in Europe, whereas in Australia and North America, Chef is actually a lot more popular. So depending on where you deploy as well, the expertise can also change. So DevOps is a great way to get applications out quickly. The key thing about it is that not everyone is building and coding applications. Leveraging the cloud is not about shipping apps out as fast as possible. It's about moving workloads into a different environment and being able to manage them easier. So when we talk about DevOps, people implicitly think that you get continuous improvement, continuous delivery, but you can't have those things without first of all evolving into an agile process or an agile methodology. Continuous delivery, when it comes down to a waterfall style project, would be more or less impossible. And what I'm saying is, in order to get the business agility, it's really a journey that you would have to go on, from agile through to DevOps and then on beyond. When we look at the DevOps tools, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, these are all about configuring operating systems and applications. When you're actually looking at orchestrating different cloud environments, there's a whole different set of tools to use. And if you were using, say, Amazon Web Services, they give you their own set of tools. If you use Microsoft Azure, they give you their own set of tools. If you're using VMware, again, you get a separate set of tools. So in order to develop a hybrid cloud strategy, you may go ahead and choose a few vendors, a couple of vendors, and then use their tool sets to build up all your automation. One of the challenges with that is that your automation only works against that particular cloud. So let's say you wanted to move an application from private onto public. That would be a migration project done by a set of engineers instead of just rerunning a set of scripts to redeploy the application. So this is one of the big things that is catching people at the moment, is they start off with one vendor that may not have gone through an RFP, that might just be something we set up, we built this environment, and then it's become so hard for them to move, that estate has just grown and grown and grown because they're not really sure what they've deployed and how it's been deployed. Infrastructure as code is an idea where you describe your running operation and your running infrastructure as a set of templates, as a set of scripts and tools. You then use a code library or a script library to then build out the infrastructure in each different cloud. The process for infrastructure as code is to describe your environment. So let's say you have 5 virtual machines, some storage, some backups, some monitoring. Instead of writing a statement of work or a process for an engineer to go and manually configure and deploy all of those things, you would describe those in a file and you would check them in some sort of code repository. Maybe the team might review those and check them for you. Then you would go and deploy them first in an environment and test the application to make sure that it works. If there are any changes, you'd go back and change the file. And then you would then use a tool to deploy that into the cloud. So infrastructure as code is a fairly new term, but one of the important things is that every single stage is related to software. So when we talk to clients at the moment about the differences between their on-prem or data center VMware environments and the public cloud, or when we talk about OpenStack versus AWS, or AWS versus Azure, the whole difference between the estate is all about software. So if you actually dig into the differences in hardware between different clouds, there are some differences, but they're all abstracted away from you. So if you want to leverage one cloud over another, or you're looking at private versus public, the differences are completely related to software and the way that the application is architected. So it's really important to understand those things up front. Infrastructure management is not software development traditionally. And what we're also seeing is that infrastructure management teams are now having to learn these new tools and focusing on software instead of figuring out how to provision hardware environments. So now with maybe 100 lines of configuration in a file, you can leverage all sorts of different services in public and private cloud. This is a survey put together for multi-cloud abstraction libraries that are available online. All of the tools at the top are free and open source. You can download these online. the Apache libcloud project is the one that I'll talk about in a second. When people want to look at running multi-cloud applications, like I said before, Amazon give you a set of tools, Microsoft give you a set of tools, VMware give you a set of tools. If you build your DevOps and your automation using purely those tools, to move from one cloud to another becomes very, very difficult. Because VMware's networking architecture is different to Amazon's. The way in which you containerize applications is different to the way it happens in Azure. So if you want to leverage a proper multi-cloud environment, or you want to automate your cloud estate, one of the best ways to do it is using one of these multi-cloud abstraction libraries. libcloud is one of them, but there are some important things to note. When you're looking at PaaS versus IaaS, so PaaS is platform as a service. Some things like backup, for example, or database as a service. Microsoft Azure has a service called Data Lake. If you're leveraging their machine learning functionality, for example, one of the key things with PaaS is that the differences between one cloud and another are vast. So more or less, if you pick some PaaS services, you are stuck with that vendor. When we look at multi-cloud tools, again, I think database as a service, there's only one library that really supports abstraction between different clouds, and it doesn't do that to a very mature level. So when you're talking about multi-cloud abstraction, really you're looking at compute, so virtual machines and storage, DNS, CDN, load balancer, and more recently containers, as really the only things you can abstract multi-cloud. If you go and leverage the IoT service from AWS, then there is no equivalent service in Azure. The API is completely different. The service that you consume is completely different. So when you think about multi-cloud, it's really important to think about which services you want to leverage from different providers. I'll give you an example of where this has hurt people in the past. So HP Helion was a cloud service launched in 2014, I think. They had a REST API. There were clients all over the world who built and coded against that REST API. They announced in January that they were going to shut that down. So anyone who had basically coupled themselves against that API then had to go and rewrite all of their DevOps and all their automation tools against that service. So HP did offer migration tools and migration options for people, which would help you move the workload onto another service. But any automation you built over the last couple of years would more or less have to be thrown away and rewritten. So this is one really important thing to note when you're building up a orchestration system, a DevOps system, is how you can move from one cloud to another. So I mentioned Apache libcloud earlier on. It's run by the Apache Software Foundation, which is a not-for-profit. And it's a project, open source project. It's available online for free. It gets around 250,000 downloads a month. You might see some of the cloud management providers, CMPs, that have portals where you can manage multiple clouds. Underneath, in the engine, the core engine, they use libraries like this to do that. So you can use this as an orchestration tool to leverage multiple clouds. And the API that you use to talk to libcloud is consistent across every cloud provider. Dimension Data has a public cloud. These are all the locations that we're present in. I work for Dimension Data. I work on innovation and their DevOps tooling. We focus a lot of our time making sure that our clients can leverage any tools and automation they've already built on our cloud. And also we offer them help and expertise around ways of developing orchestration and automation amongst not just our cloud but other clouds as well. We recognize that now the average number of clouds that people consume is just over 2. So when we say here's a set of tools, we don't assume people are just going to build against our API. They're going to look at how they can leverage other clouds as well. One of the big differentiators for Dimension Data is that our public cloud API is exactly the same as our private cloud. So you can purchase a private cloud from Dimension Data. We can install that into either one of our data centers, or we can install that into your data center, and we manage and operate that for you. The API that you get with Dimension Data's cloud service is, as I said, exactly the same on private as it is in public. So if you do build automation tools, then you can leverage the same set of tools in the same suite amongst both the private and the public. Also, if you're looking at migrating workloads either from public back to private or vice versa, that's a lot easier than moving from, say, a VMware or an OpenStack into an Amazon or an Azure, because those systems and APIs are completely different. We also have a customer portal for anyone to use, in which you can manage any of the locations that I showed on the previous slide through our self-service interface. If you're a customer of Dimension Data, you can provision workloads anywhere in the world from the same portal. Also, if you have a private cloud as well, you can manage that from the same portal. So if you have either private in your data center or a private dedicated in one of ours, and also some public resources, you can manage that all through the same interface. So I've been talking a lot about some of the tooling and ideas around leveraging APIs. This has been our focus over the last year because we've seen some of the shifts and trends in the market. We've seen that people are leveraging not just one but multiple tools to do DevOps and automation. The customers are leveraging not just one cloud provider but multiple. So what we've been focusing our efforts on is trying to make sure that no matter how they want to leverage our API on our systems, we have integrations with all of those tools. So on the top we've got the Chef and Puppet, which are the most popular DevOps tools. RightScale, which is a cloud management portal. Docker, Kubernetes, Mantle and Rancher are the top four. They're all to do with microservices orchestration. So we have engineers building integrations with all of those tools. And then also we have more sort of closer integrations with languages like C#, .NET, PowerShell, Java, Python, and more recently Go. So any of our clients who want to do deeper integrations into our APIs can download these tools and read the documentation on our website. And like I said, that's the same against private, hosted, and also our public cloud. Amongst all the clients we've been speaking to, the skills that they have, the skills that their engineering teams have, their operations team, their support teams, are all trying to figure out how they learn about these new shifts, these new changes. It doesn't matter whether you're a VMware architect and now you have to think about Docker and how Docker works. VMware have just announced some changes in supporting something called VMware integrated containers. So they're trying to figure this problem out. If you're a storage expert, or you're a storage engineer, you've now got to think about object-based storage and how you leverage cloud storage as well as on-premise storage. Data protection is very similar, not just leveraging traditional backup and restore functionality, but also trying to think about how you can back up all the different things that have been deployed in the cloud. If you've got a data lake or a data archive, how do you back that up? On the internet side, SDN has been a massive trend and have been talked about for a while. We're seeing that customers are really just looking for some help and expertise around SDN and building an SDN strategy. Security is very similar, looking at cybersecurity. Now that you're moving to the cloud, you've potentially got a lot more exposure on the public internet. And also the way that orchestration is done. So we know that next generation data centers and IT environments are going to be very, very different to what they are today. So that's why we have set up our organization around those pillars. We are looking at digital infrastructure as a practice. Hybrid cloud is a major strategy of ours. Workspaces for tomorrow. So we do projects for clients all over the world where we help them create hot desks and virtual environments for all of their users. And also on cybersecurity, we're one of the leading companies in the world for cybersecurity. So all of these individual pillars play very closely together. Dimension Data as a business operates here in the Netherlands, but also in 30 other countries around the world. We have 31,000 employees, and we operate some major operating environments for clients like HSBC and Pfizer. And those are both sort of on-prem or traditional data center operating environments, as well as cloud, so multi-cloud. We do end-user compute and device management, managed security services, a whole range of things. If you want to understand any more about dimension data, we're at booth 144 as you come in the front doors. You'll see we've got a big stand there. And please, if you have any questions, if you can either ask them now or come up to me after the session, and I'll be more than happy to help. That's all for today.
Thank you.
Any questions?